So over the last few weeks, I've been on a bit of a tour. And instead of touring the country like with a band, I haven't been doing that. I've been touring on Zoom mostly, but a little bit of face to face. And having a chance to talk with the leaders whose businesses we support. And many of these leaders, and some of you are here today, are folks who have become dear friends of mine. And when I say support, I mean these are organizations where we have the opportunity to provide a long-term system for developing the capacity of their leaders, so that the goal is so that 5 years from now they're no longer asking themselves. And when I say they, I mean so that we are no longer asking ourselves these questions like, where are our leaders and how do we develop them? And if there's one thing I can tell you after those conversations with these leaders, and it's something that I have the greatest job in the world to be able to have those kinds of conversations with friends of mine whose organizations we have an opportunity to support. I will tell you this, that leaders are under a lot of pressure right now. It is just I don't know. I've thought a lot about this, even preparing for this week, because, is it any more or less? I don't know. I just know that there's pressure and I feel it as well. And it also made me realize, there's something that I talked to my wife about. It made me realize how grateful I am that I didn't become a clinical psychologist. And I'm not saying that these people are all clinically have problems, but I think I do too. And I feel like one of the reasons is I have felt the pressure of every leader I've talked to. And I would say that incredible things are happening for them. Truly amazing things, but also challenges. And there's also a sense of isolation that sometimes we all feel in these roles, these leadership roles we have. Some are facing shortages of leaders in their growing businesses. Others are facing challenges with other owners or with investors. Others are facing a moment where they're having to cut back on different kinds of things that they provided to employees in the past. And quite frankly, like that some of them are having to move from, we provide something at a phenomenal level, but now it's only an excellent level, because of the financial constraints on an organization. Some are facing massive challenges due to changes in interest rates. Others are facing the reality of having to have really tough conversations, and still others are facing all of that in the presence of significant health problems. One thing that's common, I think maybe because I'm facing this, caring for aging parents, dealing with kids with addictions, or even divorces or death of spouses. There is a lot. Even in saying it, y'all, there's a lot going on out there. And there's a sense of isolation sometimes that comes with it. And in the face of all that adversity, incredible lessons are being learned. You can't deny that. I'm just hearing the stories. Incredible lessons are being learned, and incredible moments of refocusing on a deeper purpose. That's what's occurring. But the pressure is real. And this question of how can we assess our impact on others in moments like this is important. While every one of these leaders are facing pressure, they're also aware that how they are showing up in these moments is one of the most important factors in their leadership and in their responsibility for others. So how do we become aware of our impact on others? And if we don't assess it in some way, honestly, how can we know what we have to change? That's a long intro to this. I'm Dr. Rob McKenna, and welcome to the Wild Conversation, where we make the best thinking in psychology, leadership, and organizational science accessible to leaders who are willing to learn and edit for their sake and for the sake of others. And today we are kicking off a new series on strategies for leading under pressure. And our focus today is on assessing your impact on others. And this was actually a series that we did way back at the beginning of a global pandemic. And I have different thoughts today. Can you imagine that? Things are different now. But what's not different is the reality of pressure, and pressure on leaders in every single one of us. And in our following weeks, we're going to tackle important topics. We're going to get a little bit strategic in following weeks. I'm going to set the frame today regarding purposeful conviction, changing perspective, building relationships, and elevating self-awareness. And all these topics we're going to cover are not only supported by rigorous research, but also will be incredibly practical, is my hope, and actionable kind of strategies. But we have to start here. And if I told you that how you show up under pressure when the pressure is on, if I told you that how you show up when the pressure is on is just as important as anything you do or any action you'll take, would you believe me? And let me say that with more conviction. How you show up in high pressure moments is just as important as anything you do. So let's dig in. And before we can ever begin to take action, we will do in the following weeks, I'm suggesting that we must start with an awareness of our specific impact. A couple of points I want to make is that our impact on others, your impact on others is your capital Y-O-U-R impact on others. In other words, your impact, you impact people differently than others around you might if they were in your same role. I think that's important to note. We're different. Your presence impacts other people all the time, whether we like it or not. We do that. And if you don't care about if you don't care, but you know you do impact others, I'm not sure how to help. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, you know you do, but I don't care. But if you aren't aware that your presence matters, or maybe you are and you're interested, I hope that you'll lean in and believe me when I say that it does. It's the reason I tell my sons that how they show up in a class that is just okay could actually make that same class for the professor and for other students a bit better. And that bit may be a big impact. You know what I mean? Like, if we thought about, like, I'm not just here to just be a recipient, but that how I show up as a student in a classroom could make a difference. Have you ever worked for a leader to whom you directly reported? So you have this leader, and then that leader moves on or out of their position, and now you work for a new manager. Same job. And have you ever seen everything change as a result of that new manager in your life? It's kind of a no-brainer, right? Of course we have. Like, even if all the other variables remain the same, changing managers might as well sometimes be changing universes. A whole new set of rules and assumptions, new ways of communicating. One manager might have loved to read over the financials of the business, and the next one could not read a financial statement if their life depended on it. You know, it's like all these things, these are just little things that change, but we also have different emotional processing and pressure. The second thing I want to say just in framing is assessment is necessary for change. And to assess is to measure, to calculate, and to understand. And if we don't assess, we're walking more blindly than we could. And that means that everyone else will be just walking the same way as us. So to assess is to stop, to pause, to collect the data, and to make a decision. But assessment on its own, I don't think is enough. And it's like when we take our blood pressure at the doctor's office, our blood pressure in that moment matters, but does it tell us about the root causes? You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you drank a bunch of coffee before you go into the doctor's office and you want to go, hey, I drank a bunch of coffee. That's why I'm elevated right now. But they may not know that. So there's other root causes that may be going on. I will never forget the anxiety I felt the first time I was asked to speak in a church. So there's a story for me personally around this. I was asked by the pastor to play Phil, I think his name's Phil, from The Amazing Race. I think that's who that is, Phil. And although speaking in front of business people wouldn't have even caused a blip, this was maybe almost 20 years ago, wouldn't have even caused a blip on my anxiety screen. Speaking in front of a church was entirely different. And looking back, I now realize that anxiety came from a couple of things: my perceptions of who was supposed to speak in church and my perceptions of my ability to act or lack thereof. And although I knew I was pretty good at speaking from my gut, acting and speaking from a script was new for me. And I was also anxious because I grew up in a church where only the theologically educated people spoke up front. And so this all brought me to this moment where I was feeling this is me. What I was feeling was I have no business on this stage. And the script was simple, and it went something like this: welcome to The Amazing Race. This race will take teams of 30 to 32 countries and 6 continents all around the globe. 24 contestants will take part in this amazing race around the world. And I correctly said the first sentence, welcome to The Amazing Race. And then I glanced up and I saw my wife's face in the audience, or the congregation as it were. And honestly, my mind went blank. Her face was clearly saying this, or this is what I thought: please make this stop. Like, please get off of that stage and just let's move on. You know, that's what I saw. I don't think that's what she was thinking. She's told me that since, but that's what I thought. And to my disappointment, the rest of my acting went from the possibility of being okay to being a disaster of awkward starts and stops. And I would tell you that this was one of many ineffective moments in my life where my inability to compose myself was exposed. What I also know in terms of purpose is that my anxiety probably impacted everybody else. So you can imagine that my anxiety then probably caused them to really not pay attention to the point I was trying to make or what I was trying to set up for the person who was going to speak next. They were just focused on my anxiety. And even though I don't experience that kind of anxiety when speaking in a church today, I'm not immune to it creeping, not that I get invited very often, but I'm not immune to it creeping back into my consciousness in other situations. And situations where my negative self-talk and my lack of confidence or actual ability, they can meet in a swirl of ineffectiveness. And the perception and weight we put on outcomes, I think plays a role in that anxiety. The more important I perceive the outcome to be, the more I'm risking and the greater my anxiety. And this can happen even in a circumstance where I might otherwise have confidence. And whether it's speaking in a church or having a conversation with someone close where I feel something is at risk, that anxiety, I think, impacts my ability to show up well. And it can impact their ability to show up well in that same conversation. So it's interesting. What we know about this is that our emotional presence is contagious. So as leaders, setting the frame for composure is so critical, but it's easier said than done. So I don't want to say like, be composed. That would be ridiculous. So in the following weeks, we're going to get into the strategies that we studied that allowed people to be their best selves in these moments. And to be composed is the state of standing firmly in who we are while staying connected to those who matter most to us. Standing firmly in who we are while staying connected to those who matter most to us, especially when those unpredictable high pressure moments come. And who among us wouldn't want that? And I don't believe it matters whether you are a CEO, a parent, a manager for the first time, or a student, one of my sons in a classroom. High pressure moments challenge all of us. And if you don't think they do, that's a different conversation that we need to have. They're creating challenges because to face the reality that it's challenging most everybody else. And I've worked with enough people to know, and leaders to know, that none of us are immune to the possibility of losing it when we're under pressure. And as I was saying at the beginning, different things cause each of us to lose our ability to hold on to ourselves, to be composed. We have different causes. We have different stories that each of us would tell. For some, public speaking is the fear. Maybe conflict is uncomfortable for you. For others, simply being responsible for the experience or learning of others, being the leader, causes you anxiety. If you're a leader for the first time, let's say you're managing for the first time, let's say you've had massive technical strength, and whatever that technical skill is that you do, when you become a manager for the first time, it's a new world and possibility of learning that's out there. And whether anxiety makes us feel incompetent or unworthy or mean and reactive, the impact of losing our composure is significant. But I would say that most of us face high pressure situations, I think, more often than we would like. And in some cases, we've brought these situations on ourselves. And in other cases, they've been the result of circumstances that are outside of our control. You may be facing the need to have a dreaded conversation with someone close to you, or you've been asked to speak in front of a group, and that is enough to make you feel sick. You may work with a person who taxes you emotionally. And because you spend so much time managing your relationship, there's little time left to do much else. Or you may have taken on a leadership role in an area where you don't have much confidence. And in these situations and all the others that tax us emotionally, mentally, and even physically, the common reality is that the stakes feel high. You know what I mean? The stakes feel high in those kinds of moments. High pressure moments. The reality is this. Okay, let's step back. The reality is this. And it's hard when we're in them to face this, but high pressure moments are both a blessing and a curse. They are. It's hard. And that's kind of the way that most people express it. They're blessings because they have the power to teach us something. We know that. Research supports that. Or to release a possibility that we couldn't see otherwise. They have the power to change our perspective and offer a view of a better future for us and for those in our care. At the same time, they feel like tests that we can either pass or fail. And the passes have tremendous power, but the failures are just as powerful. The failures can haunt us because of the trail of the trail of destruction that sometimes results. Broken relationships, failed businesses, shame, doubt, and feelings of letting others down. Like all these things are results of tests we believe we've failed, or we actually did fail. That's a reality, but pressure is as real as the conflicts, the arguments, the changes that cause it to happen inside of us. And while it's unavoidable, how we deal with it is not. And I hope you don't hear me minimizing the real challenge that I personally face, but the opportunity is there to actually deal with it. And when I say deal with it, I mean there are choices to make. And the problem is that we so often blame pressure and anxiety as the causes of the outcomes we see. And when we do that, we fail to see that pressure is the catalyst, but not necessarily the uncomfortable circumstance. In some cases, it was our inability to handle it that may have made the difference for us and for others. So if, and this is a big if, I actually have it in my notes as a big bold if we could have been just a little better at handling the storm, might it be possible that we would have been able to play a better part in I'm going to say a couple things, y'all, and I hope this is not pointed at you. Some of you might think I was like cheating. I have cheats or something for you, but I wrote this in my notes. We might have been able to play a better part in saving a failing marriage, or making it thrive, or ending it well. We might have played a better part in leading our business through a downward swing in the economy, to manage frontline people better, or even to provide calm and clear thinking for others in the midst of a heated argument that would eventually tear a community, a business, a church, or a friendship apart. And these high pressured moments are challenging because of both the players and the impacts, the potential impacts. And so as we get into this, I just and think more deeply, when it comes to leadership, when we feel responsible for other people, we come face to face with pressure. And although pressure is challenging, there is an upside. Pressure is an indicator. I know I'm sounding like there's a lot of redundancy in this, but pressure is an indicator that something is changing. And change introduces the possibility that we'll learn something new. And I'm not talking about simply learning a new skill. That's a part of this, but the possibility that will fundamentally change who we are and how we show up. While the core of our DNA and our character isn't likely to change that much, we are constantly molded and shaped by our environment and by the positive and negative experiences we encounter. And so you might be thinking this to yourself. So great, Rob. Super. So you're telling me that pressure creates the opportunity to become better at leading other people, to which I would say, yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. The high pressure moments we face are oftentimes moments we wouldn't choose. But these moments, they feel like tests that challenge our identity, our relationships, and our feelings about ourselves. But nonetheless, it's clear from research and conversations with thousands of people that these moments are offering us the deepest insights. And I don't think we may not need to throw ourselves into these situations all the time, but simply reframe how we think about them. Like iron being formed in a fire. I love that analogy. Situations we describe as high pressure provide the heat necessary to build our character, to rely on others, and to learn new things about ourselves, our world, and other people around us. And so as we think about this is what I would love to invite us into. I mean, obviously I've said this over and over, pressure is this reality in our lives. And I say this over and over again because I never want anyone to hear me minimizing that, because I've felt it personally, but it is also the catalyst for change. It's one of the big realities in this. And that how we show up in these moments, which we're going to talk about how to do that, but this week is all about how we show up in these moments. Can you imagine being around a person or a leader who is standing composed in the midst of the storm? What would that do to you? We've experienced this, and I want this for myself. And I want it for all of us, because I know some of the things that you're facing. So here's a few questions as we get into a conversation to think about, maybe this, and wherever you want to go. What's some recent experience you've had where you've felt your pressure indicator going off? Like if you wanted to share something like that, or if you wanted to talk about how do you physically experience pressure, just to begin to assess, like, what does pressure do to you that might be affecting other people? And then maybe this is also, if you could be the person that others need you to be under pressure, what would that be like? Maybe establishing for you a vision for what you would like to be like under pressure. Maybe that's the conversation you have. So lots of food for thought, I hope, and let's keep the conversation going.